Have you ever witnessed a moment so explosive, so unexpected, so violently off-script that you could feel the temperature of the room change, even through a television screen? Because that's exactly what happened the night Jonathan Bailey stepped onto the stage of Late Night with Seth Meyers and unknowingly walked straight into the center of Meghan Markle's most dangerous, most unfiltered reaction yet. Let me ask you something directly. What happens when a rising Hollywood star makes one wrong joke about a duchess whose public image hangs by a thread? And more importantly, what happens when that duchess decides she's had enough? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. This story doesn't begin with Jonathan's joke. It doesn't even begin backstage. No, it starts long before that, in a place most people forget when they talk about Meghan Markle. A place where ambition and insecurity collide. A place where silence is weaponized, and every insult becomes a personal threat. The place where Meghan believes her public identity must be defended at all costs. Now imagine this. You're sitting in a studio audience. The lights are warm, the crowd is buzzing, Seth Meyers is doing what he does best, easing into comedy with that razor-edged soft charm, and then Jonathan Bailey walks out. You don't expect anything unusual because Jonathan isn't known for controversy. He's known for his talent, his warmth, his charm, his brilliant acting. In fact, he's one of the last people you'd expect to ignite a celebrity war. Yet on this night, something in that room shifts. A joke lands. The crowd laughs. Seth smiles. Jonathan smiles. The cameras pan. And somewhere backstage, Meghan Markle stops breathing for half a second. You might be wondering, why would Jonathan Bailey, of all people, trigger Meghan Markle so intensely? Why him? Why now? That's where the story starts to twist. Because Meghan wasn't even supposed to be part of the conversation that night. Not officially. Not publicly. Not on the record. And yet, Jonathan mentions her. Not kindly. Not diplomatically. And not in the reverential tone Meghan has spent years trying to demand from Hollywood. Instead, he makes a joke. A sharp one. A truthful one. A joke that uses one phrase Meghan cannot tolerate under any circumstances. Fake Duchess. Let that sink in for a moment. Fake Duchess. Whether the audience understood the political implications, or the royal rules, or the legal technicalities didn't matter, the phrase stuck. You could feel it. The way a blade slicing air makes a whisper before it makes a wound. And Meghan? Meghan felt it too. She wasn't in the audience, but she didn't need to be. People close to the production say she received the clip backstage instantly, practically in real time. And the moment she heard Jonathan's tone, the moment she saw the audience laughing, the moment that phrase hit her ears, she snapped. Not in the dramatic Hollywood way with tears, or shouting, or storming off. No, her reaction was colder, heavier, sharper. Because Meghan Markle doesn't explode. She calculates. She repositions. And then she strikes. But here's the twist. That night, just once, just for a flashing instant, she dropped the calculation. She dropped the layers. She dropped the caring humanitarian, the victimized duchess, the misunderstood actress. And what came out of her mouth made even her closest staff step back. I will send you to your grave. Was it metaphorical? Was it hyperbole? Was it genuine? Was it said out of fury or fear or humiliation? That depends on who you ask. That depends on who heard it. But one thing is certain. Meghan Markle said something she could never take back. Something that would ripple through Hollywood with a force even she didn't expect. Let's pause here for a moment, because I want you to be fully aware of what you're stepping into. This story isn't just about a joke. It isn't just about a celebrity feud. It isn't just about one tense moment on late-night television. This is about image warfare, about reputation control, about the psychology of a woman who has spent years fighting to be seen as royal while constantly being accused of being something else entirely. And at the same time, it's about Jonathan Bailey, a man who wasn't looking for a fight, wasn't seeking attention, wasn't hoping to create chaos, but who found himself in the crosshairs because he dared to say something that wasn't pre-approved, sanitized, or filtered by Meghan's carefully curated public narrative. Think about how fragile a celebrity's image really is. One sentence can elevate them. One joke can break them. One viral clip can redefine them. And in Meghan's case, that fragility is amplified by years of online battles, media scrutiny, family controversies, royal politics, Hollywood ambition, and an internet that never forgives and never forgets. So when Jonathan's joke aired, or rather, when the joke and the audience reaction spread online within minutes, Meghan experienced something she absolutely cannot tolerate: loss of control. And here's where things turn darker. Meghan's team has what insiders call an escalation protocol. A real one. A series of steps taken whenever she feels publicly threatened. That protocol was activated immediately. Calls were made. Messages were sent. Influencers were notified. PR teams began pre-drafting statements and counter-narratives. And before the episode even finished airing, Meghan had already taken drastic action against Jonathan Bailey. Not defensive action. Offensive. But here's the irony. The more Meghan tries to silence someone, the more the public starts listening to them. And Jonathan Bailey has never been more visible, more supported, or more defended than he was in the hours after that moment. Hollywood loves him. Audiences love him. Critics love him. And Meghan? Meghan knows she can't afford another enemy in the industry. Not now. Not after the collapse of multiple projects. Not after losing key supporters. Not after the slow but steady erosion of her influence. So what does someone like Meghan do when she feels humiliated on a global stage? She retaliates. But retaliation is dangerous. Especially when your target isn't afraid of you. Especially when your inner circle is leaking. Especially when every move you make feeds a narrative you're trying to avoid. Because here's the truth Meghan doesn't want anyone to admit. The more she fights to protect her title, the more people question whether she ever deserved it. And that's where Jonathan's seemingly small joke becomes a nuclear moment. Because fake Duchess isn't just an insult. It's a question. A question Meghan does not want asked. A question that threatens her biggest branding strategy. A question that Jonathan Bailey tossed into the air so casually, so playfully, so unthinkingly, but that Meghan could not allow to go unchallenged. Now ask yourself this. If you were in Meghan Markle's position, humiliated on television, mocked by an A-list actor, ignored by the audience, trending online for the wrong reasons, what would you do? Would you shrug it off? Laugh it away? Pretend it didn't matter? Or would you feel a heat rise in your chest, a tightness in your throat, a sense of panic that people might start to believe the joke? Because what Meghan fears most isn't the insult. It's the possibility that the joke reveals something she's been trying to hide. And here's where things get truly fascinating. What Meghan did next wasn't just emotional. It wasn't even personal. It was strategic. She went after Jonathan Bailey with a precision that suggests she had rehearsed scenarios like this before. That's right. Insiders say she has entire crisis playbooks for moments exactly like this one. That alone should tell you everything about the environment she operates in. But here's what you need to keep in mind. Meghan miscalculated. For all her planning, all her strategy, all her efforts to control the narrative, she picked the wrong opponent. Because Jonathan Bailey is not afraid of her. Not even slightly. And when she tried to intimidate him, when she allegedly used that chilling phrase, it didn't silence him. It did the opposite. It emboldened him. And that's when the power dynamic shifted. Now the story becomes bigger than Meghan's anger. Bigger than Jonathan's joke. Bigger than Late Night with Seth Meyers. This becomes a story about Hollywood itself. A story about public perception. About celebrity fragility. About how quickly alliances form and dissolve behind the curtain. About how one sentence, one joke, can expose the truth about who holds power and who's losing it. By the time the night ended, multiple people backstage were shaken. They had witnessed something that wasn't supposed to happen. Something raw. Something dangerous. Something revealing. And the aftermath? Well, let's just say this feud became more than a moment. It became a warning. A shift. A fracture line that people are still whispering about. Because Meghan Markle didn't just react. She detonated. But the real twist? Jonathan Bailey didn't run. He didn't apologize. He didn't retract. Instead, he made one quiet, calculated move that Meghan never expected, and that changed the entire trajectory of this feud. And that, right there, is where this story truly begins. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever felt that eerie stillness right before something snaps? That quiet, vibrating tension where you can almost taste the shift in the air, but you don't yet know the magnitude of what's about to break? That's the energy that settled around the Late Night with Seth Meyers studio in the seconds following Meghan Markle's explosive reaction. The reaction no one saw on camera, but everyone backstage felt like a physical wave hitting the walls. And here's the haunting question that sets the stage for everything that follows. If Meghan Markle detonated behind closed doors, who was the first person to feel the heat? Because someone did. A staffer. A young assistant crouched near the hallway between the dressing rooms, wearing a headset that suddenly felt 10 pounds heavier because she had heard something she wasn't meant to hear. Something that made her freeze. Something that made her wonder if this night, this seemingly ordinary recording, had just become the beginning of something darker. The staffer didn't sign up for drama. She didn't even know Meghan was in the building. Why would she? Meghan wasn't on the guest list. Meghan had no scheduled appearance. Meghan was nowhere in the official lineup. And yet there she was, tucked in a private corner room temporarily offered to her because one of the producers owed a favor to one of her PR reps. Meghan wasn't supposed to stay long. She wasn't supposed to draw attention. She was just dropping by on her way to another engagement. Or at least that was the story her team repeated with rehearsed calm. But even then, something felt off. Meghan's presence carried tension, a kind of magnetic pressure, like she arrived not to visit, not to socialize, but to monitor, to listen, to control. So when the staffer overheard Meghan's voice spike, when she heard the tone shift from polished to primal, when she heard that chilling promise, "I will send you to your grave," directed at Jonathan Bailey, she knew instantly that she wasn't supposed to be standing there. But let me ask you something directly. What do you do when you accidentally overhear a powerful person say something that could ruin them? Do you run? Pretend you didn't hear it? Freeze? Or do you lean in because you suddenly realize you're witnessing a moment the world was never supposed to know? This staffer stayed still, breath held, heart racing. And in that suspended moment, she watched Meghan Markle like no fan, critic, journalist, or royal commentator ever has. Meghan wasn't acting, not performing, not curating an expression. This wasn't the soft smile, the warm tilt of the head, the humanitarian glow she wears like armor. No, this was something rawer, something colder. A woman stripped down to instinct and pride and fear of public humiliation. But why humiliation? Why would a single joke from Jonathan Bailey, a man who isn't even known for biting comedy, trigger such a violent response? That's where the contradiction becomes fascinating. Because Meghan thrives on media attention when she controls it, but she falls apart the moment attention turns unpredictable. Jonathan's joke was unpredictable, and unpredictability is Meghan's worst enemy. Let's rewind the clock slightly. Not too far, just a few minutes before Jonathan walked on stage. Seth Meyers' team was buzzing around the studio, following the usual rhythm of a late-night taping. Crew members adjusting lighting rigs, writers checking cue cards, stage managers coordinating transitions. The usual creative chaos. Jonathan sat casually in the green room, sipping water, going through the lighthearted pre-show notes Seth's team prepared. A few jokes, a few anecdotes, a few safe talking points about his projects. Nothing dangerous, nothing explosive. But here's the twist. Jonathan Bailey doesn't like rehearsed jokes. He likes spontaneity, authenticity, the moment. He's charming when he improvises, and everyone knows it. Seth knows it. Producers know it. Fans know it. So, naturally, they encouraged him to play around, have fun, go with the flow. That was the plan. That's always the plan. The problem is, when spontaneity meets unresolved tension, the universe occasionally delivers a moment that no one, not even the actor speaking, could have predicted. And that's exactly what happened. Jonathan walked onto the stage and felt loose, confident, comfortable. The audience adored him. Seth vibed with him instantly. The energy was warm, easy, flowing, the kind of synergy late-night interviews crave. So when Meghan's name slipped into the conversation, it wasn't planned. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't orchestrated by the writers or PR teams. It was off the cuff. Jonathan mentioned meeting someone who still thinks she's royalty, and the audience perked up. The reaction made him push the line a little further. And then came the joke, the one that detonated the night. "She acts like a duchess," he said with a playful shrug. A fake one, but still. The room erupted. Laughter, whispers, shocks. The kind of laughter that's not just amusement, but recognition. Agreement, relief. And if you've ever been someone who desperately controls your image, you know that nothing cuts deeper than a room full of people laughing at the truth you've tried your whole life to hide. But the audience's laughter wasn't what triggered Meghan. It was Jonathan's tone. Warm, casual, unbothered, almost indifferent. As if calling her a fake duchess was simply stating a fact. Inside her private room backstage, Meghan's eyes froze on the monitor. Something inside her snapped. And the staffer, the one crouched with the headset, saw it happen. Meghan stood abruptly. Her jaw tightened. Her voice, normally smooth, dropped into a low, icy whisper. And then she said the sentence that turned the night from dramatic to dangerous. "I will send you to your grave." Not shouted, not screamed, whispered, as if delivering a vow. Think about that for a moment. Let it settle. Whispered things feel more real, don't they? More intentional, more intimate. Because whispers aren't accidents. They're chosen. But here's the irony. Meghan didn't know someone was listening. She didn't know her words were not as private as she thought. She didn't know this young staffer would later share the moment with colleagues, quietly, nervously, fearfully, wondering if she had just overheard something scandalous enough to tear into headlines. But more importantly, Meghan didn't know that this staffer wasn't the only one who heard. There was another witness. A producer. Someone who had dealt with celebrity meltdowns before, but said later, in private circles, that Meghan's reaction was different. More severe, more threatening, more personal. And that producer wasn't the only one disturbed. The fear spread silently through the backstage crew like ripples across a pond. Whispered conversations, raised eyebrows, quick glances, because everyone knew Jonathan Bailey had no idea what he was about to walk back into once he stepped off that stage. Picture Jonathan walking from the bright, loud studio lights into the backstage hallway. All smiles, all charm, all obliviousness. He thought the interview went great. He thought the audience loved him. He thought it was just another fun appearance. And then he caught the look in the producer's eyes. A look that said, something happened. Something big. Something dangerous. Something aimed at him. How would you react if you stepped off stage and saw people looking at you like you were already in trouble? Would you ask questions? Would you laugh it off? Would you brush it aside? Jonathan, ever grounded, simply asked, "Is everything okay?" No one answered directly. They didn't know how to. They didn't know what to say. Because how do you explain to someone that Meghan Markle is furious at them? That she is threatening them? That her team is already scrambling to do damage control? That Meghan Markle, a woman known for lawsuits, PR attacks, media wars, and carefully orchestrated narratives, has taken something personally? Things escalated quickly after that. Producers made calls. Meghan's staff began demanding immediate conversations. Jonathan's PR people were startled by sudden frantic texts. And behind it all, the one sentence Meghan whispered, "I will send you to your grave," hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. But here's where the contradiction deepens. Meghan thrives on silence until she doesn't. She thrives on control until she loses it. She thrives on shaping narratives until a single unrehearsed joke threatens the identity she spent years constructing. Ask yourself this. Why would a woman who claims to be unbothered, empowered, above drama, secure in her identity, react with such intensity to a simple joke? Because the joke wasn't simple. Because the joke touched the nerve she fears most. Because the joke wasn't just calling her a fake duchess. It was suggesting she is pretending to be something she's not. And that's the wound Meghan tries desperately to hide. Now here comes the twist that no one backstage could have predicted. As panic spread, as Meghan raged, as staff scrambled, as producers whispered, Jonathan Bailey stayed calm. Completely calm. He didn't shrink, didn't apologize, didn't stutter, didn't retreat. Instead, he quietly asked for his phone, stepped off to the side, and made one call. Just one. No one knows exactly who he called. Not yet. Some say it was his agent. Others think it was a lawyer. A few believe it was someone connected to the royal family. But whoever answered the phone, Jonathan's tone made one thing clear. He wasn't planning to bow to Meghan Markle. And that moment, that calm, measured, unexpected refusal to be intimidated, is what truly set the feud in motion. But what Jonathan didn't know was that Meghan had already taken things further. That she had already unleashed a chain of actions she would soon, very soon, regret. Because what came next would change everything, and no one, not even Jonathan, saw it coming. Have you ever watched a situation spiral so quickly that it almost seems unreal? Like one moment, everything feels normal, controlled, predictable, and the next, it's as if someone yanked the floor out from under everyone involved. That's exactly what happened in the seconds after Jonathan Bailey made that quiet, calculated phone call, the one that signaled he was not, under any circumstances, going to back down from Meghan Markle. And here's the real question that should be echoing in your mind right now. What does a man with nothing to hide and nothing to fear look like in the face of a woman who has built an entire fortress of public identity around avoiding humiliation? Because Jonathan's calmness wasn't normal. It wasn't typical. It wasn't the expected reaction of someone who had just accidentally sparked a war with one of the most image-sensitive, narrative-driven figures in modern celebrity culture. Most actors would panic. Most actors would recoil. Most actors would immediately call their PR teams and beg to fix things before they exploded. But Jonathan didn't flinch. And that calmness, that unbothered, unaffected steadiness, absolutely infuriated Meghan Markle. Picture this. Meghan is backstage, pacing in a small private room that suddenly feels too tight, too bright, too exposed. She's gripping her phone so tightly that the case bends. Her PR representative is whispering frantic advice. Another aide tries soothing her, urging her not to escalate. But Meghan isn't listening. Her eyes are fixed on the monitor replaying Jonathan's joke, the audience's laughter, the way Seth Meyers chuckled and leaned in for more. Every second feels like a fresh layer of humiliation. And if there's one thing she cannot tolerate, it's the world laughing. What she doesn't realize yet is that Jonathan Bailey's refusal to crumble is about to become the pivot point in the feud. Because Meghan thrives on opponents who apologize, opponents who cower, opponents who issue statements, bend their knees, retract their comments. Those people are manageable. Those people fit into her script. But Jonathan isn't manageable, not tonight. Not after that joke. Not after her reaction. And especially not after whatever was said on the other end of that quiet phone call. But let's pull the camera back for a moment. Step away from Meghan. Step away from Jonathan. Step away from the producers frantically scrambling. Let's zoom out into the audience, because this is where things get even more fascinating. Inside the studio, the energy remained high. The crowd still buzzing, unaware of the volcanic drama erupting just a few feet away behind the walls. They had laughed. They had clapped. They had reacted with pure, unfiltered honesty. And while they had no idea that Meghan Markle was somewhere in the building, they had sensed something electric about the moment. Something unscripted. Something too raw to be ordinary. Audience members later described the vibe in the room as lightning-like. They didn't know why. They didn't know what was happening backstage. They only knew that Jonathan Bailey had taken a risk, and the world seemed ready for it. Meanwhile, Seth Meyers, who is an expert at reading rooms, felt the shift too. He knew the joke landed harder than expected. He knew the audience didn't just laugh. They recognized truth. And Seth, ever the professional, kept the show going smoothly. But there was a flicker in his eyes. A small, fleeting expression of surprise. Because even he didn't anticipate Jonathan touching the Meghan nerve. But here's the contradiction. Seth Meyers works in comedy. Jokes are currency. Edgy remarks are oxygen. Yet even he understood that Jonathan's comment wasn't just comedy. It was commentary. A line that crossed from playful ribbing into the realm of public critique. And critique is dangerous when directed at Meghan Markle. Not because she can't handle it, but because she refuses to. Backstage, Meghan's reaction evolved from anger to something far more calculated. The pacing stopped. The voice lowered. Her expression shifted into that eerily calm mask she wears when she's about to make a decisive move. If you've followed Meghan long enough, you know this look. It's the look she had before the Oprah interview bombshells, before the Spotify fallout, before the Netflix negotiations. It's the look she adopts when she's tired of being perceived as weak and ready to retaliate. Meghan didn't just want an apology, she wanted control. And the fastest way to regain control? Disable the threat. So she made a decision. A drastic one. The kind of decision that her PR team usually talks her out of. The kind that involves consequences. Headlines. Fallout. The kind that exposes her insecurities far more than Jonathan's joke ever did. But tonight, her emotions outran her strategy. She told her team to schedule a direct confrontation. Let that sink in. Not a statement. Not a tweet. Not a behind-the-scenes complaint. Not a quiet email. She wanted to confront Jonathan Bailey in person. Now ask yourself, why would Meghan want to confront someone face-to-face? Why would she willingly step into a confrontation? Why would she risk being seen as emotional, unstable, or thin-skinned? Because humiliation is the one thing she cannot swallow, especially when delivered publicly, unexpectedly, and by someone she underestimated. So here's what happened next. Meghan told her team she was going to intercept Jonathan the moment he stepped out of the hallway. She wanted to address it immediately, to shut him down before the story could spiral, to force him into submission through sheer intensity, authority, and presence. But as Meghan marched toward the hallway, something happened that she couldn't have predicted. Jonathan Bailey finished his phone call. He stepped out of the private corner. His face was calm, his posture relaxed, the opposite of someone who expected to be confronted by a furious duchess with a bruised ego. And this is the moment everyone backstage later said gave them goosebumps. He looked directly at Meghan as she approached. Their eyes locked. The tension was thick, almost audible, like static before a storm. Meghan expected him to look nervous, or guilty, or apologetic. But Jonathan didn't give her any of that. He simply raised one eyebrow, just slightly, as if silently asking, "Is this really what you're going to do?" That one gesture destroyed Meghan's script. Because it revealed something she didn't want to face. She had no power over him. And humans do dangerous things when they realize they can't control the person they want to silence. What happened next wasn't a confrontation. It wasn't a showdown. It wasn't a verbal explosion. It was worse. Meghan froze. Her steps stuttered. She hesitated. That millisecond of doubt, that tiny fracture, was noticed by every staff member watching. Because Meghan Markle doesn't hesitate. Yet tonight, she did. Jonathan's calmness disarmed her. His confidence unnerved her. His lack of fear confused her. This wasn't a man intimidated by royal branding or Hollywood alliances or online armies. He didn't fear her status. He didn't fear the headlines she could summon. He didn't fear her lawyers. And when someone you're trying to intimidate refuses to react, it destroys your strategy before it even begins. Meghan's pause, that 1 second where she looked stunned, was enough to flip the dynamic entirely. But before she could recover, before she could speak, before she could unleash the sharp, rehearsed chastisement she had been building inside her chest, Jonathan's phone vibrated. A message, a notification, one that made his eyes widen for a moment, one that made him nod slowly to himself, one that made Meghan's stomach drop, because she recognized the look of someone who suddenly had leverage. Jonathan's phone screen lit up with a message from someone influential, someone with knowledge. Someone who had heard the joke and wasn't condemning him, but supporting him. Meghan saw it. Jonathan saw her see it. And in that fragile, electric moment, he put his phone down and spoke 3 words so calmly, so disarmingly, so quietly, that they shook Meghan more than the joke itself. "You shouldn't push." Meghan blinked. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Jonathan didn't stop. "You're already losing," he said. Not as a threat, not as a taunt, just a fact. A simple, unshakable truth delivered like a doctor giving a diagnosis. And that truth landed harder than the fake Duchess joke. Because Meghan felt it. Deeply, painfully, viscerally. She had lost control of the narrative. Lost control of the room. Lost control of her own reaction. Lost control of Jonathan. And the more she felt that loss of control, the more desperate she became. But here's the real twist, the one no one expected. Jonathan wasn't the only one who suddenly gained leverage. Someone else entered the hallway. Someone Meghan did not want to see. Someone who was about to expose a new layer of this feud that even Jonathan didn't know existed. And what this person revealed would change everything, again. Have you ever watched someone's face go from confident to terrified in a single heartbeat? That moment when their shoulders stiffen, their breath stops, and their eyes widen just enough to betray the truth they don't want anyone to see. That's exactly what happened when Meghan Markle turned her head and saw who had just stepped into the hallway. And here's the provocative question that should hit you right now. Why would the arrival of one person, just one unexpected figure, shake Meghan more than Jonathan's joke, the public humiliation, or even her own outburst? Because the person who stepped into that hallway wasn't a fan, wasn't a staffer, wasn't a producer, wasn't a random passerby. It was someone who knew her. knew her before the titles, before the roles, before Hollywood recast her as a royal rebel. Someone who knew her when she was still Meghan trying to be Meghan. This wasn't a friend. It wasn't an ally. It wasn't someone who admired her. It was someone she avoided at all costs. A former publicist she once worked with during her early Hollywood days. A publicist who had seen her behind the curtain before the world ever called her a duchess. A publicist who had witnessed the ambition, the strategic charm, the behind-the-scenes maneuvering, all long before the palace gates opened for her. And his presence here, tonight, was a disaster. His name wasn't whispered loudly. His name wasn't shouted. But when he stepped into the hallway, uninvited, unexpected, and very aware of the tension, Meghan's entire body language changed. The mask cracked. The confidence evaporated. The persona slipped. Because this man had receipts. Literal ones. And emotional ones. He had stories. And emails. And memories she prayed no one in this building, especially Jonathan Bailey, would ever hear. Now ask yourself this. What kind of past connection would terrify Meghan more than a room full of laughing audience members? What kind of old colleague could walk in and destabilize her to the point where she nearly forgot she was mid-confrontation? Someone who knew the pre-Duchess version of Meghan Markle, the version she desperately tries to bury. This publicist, let's call him Daniel, froze when he saw Meghan. Not because he was intimidated, not because he was impressed, but because he recognized instantly that her old habits hadn't changed at all. And the look he gave her? It wasn't fear. It wasn't resentment. It wasn't even shock. It was disappointment. The worst possible reaction for someone who has built an entire identity around being admired. Jonathan, who had no idea why Meghan suddenly looked like she had been caught committing a crime, turned to see what she was staring at. And when he saw Daniel, he made the same mistake the audience made. He assumed this was just another staffer, another backstage member, someone with no connection to the unfolding storm. He had no idea. Daniel wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't scheduled. He wasn't part of Jonathan's team. He wasn't part of Seth Meyers' team. He was consulting for a guest on the next episode, a guest who arrived early, causing Daniel to wander the corridor looking for them. Fate, coincidence, timing, call it whatever you want. But Daniel walking into that hallway at that exact second was the universe dropping a match into a dry forest. Imagine the air in that hallway. Thick, silent, charged, unspoken words flying like live wires. And Daniel, calm, steady, mildly amused, simply said, "Well, Meghan, it's been a while. Not warm. Not cold. Not friendly. Not hostile. Just a simple statement loaded with history." Meghan's jaw tightened. Her eyes darted. Her composure shattered for a split second. "Daniel," she breathed, trying to recover. "What are you doing here?" The question wasn't polite. It was defensive, sharp-edged, almost accusatory. Jonathan watched, confused. He didn't understand the dynamic. He didn't know why Meghan suddenly seemed small, something she never allows herself to be. Daniel shrugged lightly, as though this wasn't the most explosive coincidence of the night. "I'm consulting on the next segment. I wasn't expecting to run into, well, all of this." His eyes flicked from Meghan to Jonathan. Meaning, he saw the tension. He heard whispers of what happened. He read Meghan's expression like a book he'd already studied. And that's when Jonathan instinctively asked, "You two know each other?" Meghan's reaction was instantaneous. "No," she said too quickly. Too sharply. Too obviously. It was the kind of no that actually means absolutely yes. Daniel raised an eyebrow, the same way Jonathan had mere moments ago, and replied, "We worked together. Years ago. Worked together." Past tense. A loaded phrase. Meghan inhaled slowly, every muscle in her face trying not to show the panic coursing through her. Because Daniel wasn't just an old contact. He was a witness. A witness to her early tactics. A witness to her early manipulations. A witness to her identity building long before the royal narrative was ever crafted. And Jonathan could sense it. He didn't know the details, but he saw the fear. He saw Meghan pull back. He saw her lose the upper hand. Now here's where things take an even sharper turn. Daniel didn't walk past. He didn't leave. He didn't excuse himself. Instead, he stepped closer. Not to intimidate Meghan, but to speak to Jonathan. To Jonathan. Not her. Not the person who demanded control. But the person she was trying to silence. "Look, Daniel began slowly, his voice calm. I'm not trying to get involved. But if Meghan is making this about something bigger than a joke, you should know, this isn't the first time. That sentence hit Meghan like a slap. Her head whipped toward him. Her eyes widened. Her cheeks flushed. Stop, she hissed. But Daniel didn't stop. He kept going. Because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid of her. She has a pattern, Daniel said, eyes locked on Jonathan. A pattern of blowing up at people who don't fit into her narrative. A pattern of turning small moments into wars. A pattern of overreacting. Meghan took a step forward. Daniel, don't. But he wasn't finished. And a pattern, he continued, of threatening people when she feels she's losing control. That sentence detonated the hallway. Meghan froze. Jonathan's eyebrows lifted. The staffers who overheard her earlier words exchanged glances. Because Daniel had unintentionally validated the rumor, the whispered, terrifying phrase Meghan had uttered moments earlier. I will send you to your grave. Jonathan, now fully aware that the situation wasn't isolated or accidental, turned to Meghan. His expression was no longer confused, no longer neutral, no longer gentle. It was understanding, sharp, clear. He finally grasped the dynamic. Meghan wasn't reacting to him. She was reacting to a lifetime of insecurity, a lifetime of needing to control the narrative, a lifetime of manufacturing an identity she fears is paper thin. And here's the irony. Daniel's arrival didn't embarrass Meghan because of their past. It embarrassed her because he exposed her present. Jonathan, now absorbing every piece of this unfolding puzzle, asked one question that hit Meghan harder than any joke ever could. Is this who you are? Or who you're afraid people will find out you really are? Meghan swallowed. Hard. Her breathing tightened. Her posture stiffened. Her eyes flared with something between rage and terror. Because Jonathan didn't insult her. He didn't attack her. He didn't provoke her. He saw her. And Meghan Markle cannot stand being seen. Truly seen. Without the filters, the spin, the PR, the labels, the titles, the illusions. Daniel stepped back slightly, as if bracing for Meghan's response. Jonathan waited. The staffers held their breath. And Meghan, cornered emotionally, psychologically, publicly, privately, did what she always does when a situation slips from her grip. She pivoted. She inhaled sharply, straightened her posture, lifted her chin, forced her expression into something noble and dignified, and said with icy precision, I'm done with this conversation. And Jonathan, you don't know who you're dealing with. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was a promise. A promise that she would escalate. A promise that she would retaliate. A promise that she would not forget or forgive. Jonathan didn't flinch. Daniel didn't blink. But the staffers? They felt the air shift again. Because Meghan was about to unleash something far more aggressive than anger. She was about to activate her entire machine. Her PR team. Her media contacts. Her surrogates. Her influence network. Her crisis playbook. Everything. And the next move she made, the one she executed mere minutes later, would be the one that turned this tense backstage moment into a full-blown Hollywood scandal. A move that Jonathan Bailey never expected. A move that no producer could contain. A move that would push this feud into the public arena in a way that made the fake Duchess joke look small. Because what Meghan did next wasn't a confrontation, wasn't a phone call, wasn't a private message. It was something far more explosive. Something digital. Immediate. Irreversible. And no one in that hallway, not Jonathan, not Daniel, not the staffers, was prepared for how fast it would spread. What Meghan unleashed next would go viral in minutes. Have you ever watched a wildfire ignite from a single spark? The kind of spark so small it seems harmless until suddenly the trees catch, the winds lift, and the flames begin racing faster than anyone can control? Because that's exactly how Meghan Markle's next move erupted. One moment the hallway was tense, silent, suspended in that fragile aftershock of confrontation, and the next, Meghan made a digital decision that would set the entire evening, and eventually the entire internet, on fire. And here's the provocative question that should sit heavy with you. Why would a woman with every resource, every PR strategist, every media advisor at her disposal, choose the one option guaranteed to make everything worse? Because desperation doesn't follow logic. Humiliation doesn't follow strategy. Fear doesn't follow coaching. It follows instinct. and Meghan's instinct, when cornered, is always the same. Control the narrative before the narrative controls her. So here's what happened. The moment she turned away from Jonathan and Daniel, the moment she marched back toward that private room, her hands were already moving. She wasn't calling her PR director. She wasn't messaging her chief strategist. No, she was opening a group chat on her phone, a chat that staffers refer to euphemistically as the Rapid Response Unit. A chat comprised of influencers, bloggers, sympathetic commentators, and digital amplifiers who could shift the conversation online within minutes if Meghan needed it. And she needed it now. Badly. Desperately. Because Jonathan Bailey's calmness wasn't just unsettling, it was destabilizing. It stripped her of the moral high ground before she even had a chance to claim it. And Meghan cannot operate without a moral high ground. She needs to be the victim. She needs to be the wrong party. She needs to be the one fighting back against cruelty, not the one delivering threats in a whisper. So she crafted a message. Fast, sharp, emotional, designed to trigger outrage, sympathy, and digital protection. Designed to turn the world against Jonathan before he even had time to process what had just happened. The message wasn't long, wasn't complicated, wasn't even explicit. It was just enough to start a fire. Here's what Meghan sent to her digital circle. According to a staffer who later admitted they saw the text before she hit send, he made a cruel joke about my title and my life. It was humiliating and unnecessary. I felt attacked. I'm shaking. Just 6 lines. 6 lines that said everything without saying anything. 6 lines that framed Meghan as a victim. 6 lines that positioned Jonathan as a bully. 6 lines that turned a spontaneous comedic moment into an act of aggression. And here's the twist. She didn't accuse him of wrongdoing directly. That's not how Meghan plays this game. She implies. She hints. She positions herself emotionally. And she lets her loyal online network fill in the blanks. It's a brilliant strategy when you're trying to manipulate public perception. It's a terrifying one when you're targeting someone who never intended harm. Meghan hit send. And just like that, the wildfire began. Within 90 seconds, one influencer in the chat tweeted a cryptic comment that read, "A certain actor thought it was funny to mock a woman's trauma and belittle her identity on national TV. Disgusting." Within 3 minutes, a second influencer added, "People think titles make you invincible. They don't. Words hurt, especially when they come from someone who should know better." Within 5 minutes, a Meghan fan account, with nearly 500,000 followers, posted, "Amazing how some men think it's okay to degrade a woman's role because it makes them look edgy. You're not edgy. You're cruel." Notice what they all did? They made Jonathan's harmless joke sound violent, malicious, sexist, targeted. None of them mentioned Meghan. None of them mentioned Jonathan by name. None of them described the joke. But they didn't need to. Because ambiguity is the perfect weapon. And here's the moment that accelerated everything. A journalist, one who has always been soft toward Meghan, saw the posts, connected the dots, and tweeted, "Rumors swirling backstage that an actor insulted a duchess tonight on set. If true, this could get messy." The snowball had begun rolling. Meanwhile, Jonathan Bailey had no idea any of this was happening. He was still standing in the hallway with Daniel, replaying Meghan's reaction in his mind, feeling the weight of her threat, trying to piece together a crisis he didn't start and didn't fully understand yet. Daniel's eyes were glued to his phone. Jonathan asked, "Everything okay?" Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. His expression, tightening by the second, said everything. Because Daniel saw the first wave of tweets, saw the vague allegations, saw the digital climate starting to tilt. And he recognized the pattern instantly. Meghan wasn't confronting Jonathan. She was framing him. Jonathan sensed it before Daniel could even finish scrolling. "She's launching something, isn't she?" Jonathan asked quietly. Daniel finally met his eyes. "She's not just launching something. She's preparing to burn down your name." Jonathan didn't panic, didn't raise his voice, didn't even exhale sharply. He just whispered, "Of course she is." And that reaction, the calm recognition of the impending storm, shocked Daniel more than any meltdown ever could have. But there was something Meghan didn't anticipate, something she didn't know, something that would unravel her strategy faster than she launched it. Jonathan's team was already one step ahead. The moment Jonathan ended that quiet phone call earlier, that wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't an agent. It wasn't a friend. It was a media strategist. Someone who had been monitoring online chatter about Jonathan for months. Someone who had the ability to see digital shifts in real time. Someone who alerted Jonathan instantly when Meghan started mobilizing. That notification Meghan glimpsed on his screen? It wasn't support. It was a warning. A warning that Meghan's network was being activated. A warning that vague accusations were spreading. A warning that Jonathan's name would soon be under attack. And Jonathan, calm, collected, almost eerily composed, simply nodded. Because unlike Meghan, he wasn't fueled by panic. He was fueled by preparation. His strategist sent him one crucial message. Do not react. We're collecting everything. Jonathan pocketed his phone. Daniel, still watching tweets multiply, shook his head. This is bad, he whispered. Jonathan turned to him. Not yet, he replied. This is just noise. She wants panic. She wants me to trip. I'm not giving her that. But here's where things get emotionally complicated. Because Meghan wasn't reacting purely from malice. She was reacting from humiliation, from fear, from a loss of narrative control. She was trying to bury the pain of being laughed at, trying to redirect the narrative before the public turned the joke into truth, trying to protect the identity she clings to more than anything else, Duchess Meghan. And yet, in her emotional frenzy, she didn't realize that the one thing you should never do when you feel threatened is set a trap for someone who isn't afraid of you. As her online machine started spinning, Meghan's PR director entered her private room looking pale. He had seen the posts. He knew what they meant. He knew where they would lead. Meghan, he whispered carefully, you need to stop. Stop, she snapped. Stop what? He humiliated me. He made a joke, the director said, voice trembling. And now the press is guessing he verbally assaulted you. If this gets out of hand, it already is out of hand, Meghan fired back. And he needs to pay for it. But before he could respond, before Meghan could double down, before she could justify her escalation, another notification appeared on her phone. This time, it wasn't from an influencer, not from a fan account, not from a sympathetic journalist. It was from a major media outlet. A blue-check newsroom, a large platform. They sent a DM. Hi Meghan, we're hearing disturbing reports about an incident backstage between you and Jonathan Bailey. Would you like to comment? Meghan's eyes widened. Her heart began to pound. This wasn't the controlled sympathy she wanted. This wasn't the subtle narrative shaping she planned. This was a fire she couldn't manage. A question she couldn't answer without lying. A story she couldn't pervert without implicating herself. She had unleashed chaos, and now the chaos was demanding the truth. Meghan looked up at her PR director, terrified. What do I say? He didn't answer, because he didn't know which version of Meghan he was supposed to protect. The victim? The Duchess? The humanitarian? The woman who whispered death threats? Before anyone could speak, another message arrived. This time not to Meghan, not to her network, not to her supporters, but to Jonathan. His strategist sent him one crisp, razor-sharp sentence. She just trapped herself. Jonathan looked at the message, looked at Daniel, looked down the hallway toward Meghan's private room. And then, with quiet certainty, he made a decision that would flip the entire game on its head. Because Jonathan wasn't going to hide, wasn't going to defend, wasn't going to apologize. He was going to respond. Not with anger, not with panic, not with accusations, but with something far more devastating. Proof. And the proof Jonathan's team had been collecting was about to expose a truth Meghan feared more than the joke itself. A truth she could not spin, could not manipulate, could not outrun. Because what Jonathan did next would shatter the narrative Meghan spent years constructing. Have you ever watched a person switch from defense to offense so quietly that no one realizes the entire game has changed until it's too late? That moment when the person you assumed was cornered suddenly stands taller, calmer, more certain, revealing they were never cornered at all? That's exactly what happened when Jonathan Bailey stepped away from the hallway chaos, took a slow breath, and prepared to unleash the one thing Meghan Markle never expected: truth. Unfiltered truth. Documented truth. Truth with timestamps, witnesses, and digital footprints she could not bury, twist, or weaponize. But before we dive into Jonathan's next move, let me pose a question directly to you. Why does truth terrify people who live behind narratives? Why does truth feel like an attack to someone who spends their life performing a polished version of themselves? Why does truth, something simple, quiet, matter-of-fact, destroy the most carefully built illusions. Because truth doesn't need spin, or PR, or sympathy, or influencers, or damage control. Truth simply exists. And that alone is enough to collapse a narrative built on insecurity. Jonathan understood this. Meghan did not. So while Meghan panicked in her private room, phone buzzing with influencer posts, publicists urging restraint, journalists circling like sharks sensing blood, Jonathan stepped into a dim backstage alcove, pulled out his phone, and opened a folder his strategist had been compiling for months. A folder titled, Preemptive Protection. Now, that might sound dramatic. It might sound paranoid. It might sound unnecessary. But here's the surprising twist. Jonathan Bailey had been warned, long before tonight, that Meghan Markle might eventually target him. Not personally, not maliciously, but strategically. Because Meghan has a pattern. She reacts aggressively toward anyone who challenges her public identity. And Jonathan had done a panel interview months earlier where he made a mild, harmless comment about how fame shouldn't be taken too seriously. Meghan's fans twisted it online, claiming he was shading her. His strategist caught it, flagged it, stored it. This wasn't the first time Meghan's digital supporters misinterpreted something he said. It was just the first time she personally escalated. So Jonathan had something Meghan never expected. A documented history, stored receipts, and a digital map of every time her network tried framing him in the past. Proof. And tonight, he was ready to use it. But here's the emotional contradiction that makes this moment even more cinematic. Jonathan didn't want to destroy Meghan. He didn't want a feud. He didn't want drama. He didn't want headlines. He simply wanted fairness, integrity, balance, a chance to breathe without being dragged into a narrative designed to make him the villain. While he reviewed the folder, Daniel stood nearby, arms crossed, watching him with an expression that blended concern, admiration, and something else. A sense of recognition. Because Daniel had witnessed Meghan's pattern years ago. He had seen promising actors get cornered by her ambition. He had seen small disagreements turn into media assaults. And he had seen what happens when someone finally decides to stop running from her. Are you sure you want to do this? Daniel asked quietly. Jonathan didn't look up. I'm done being her storyline. That sentence, simple, steady, powerful, carried more weight than any joke ever could. Now, imagine Meghan in her private room at this exact moment. Her PR director pacing. Her aide scrolling in panic. Her phone buzzing relentlessly. Influencers amplifying vague accusations. Fans demanding names. Journalists asking questions she couldn't answer. This wasn't the controlled outrage she wanted. It was a digital avalanche she could no longer steer. But then something happened that made Meghan's stomach twist. Her aide gasped. Her PR director froze. Her screen lit up with a notification she never thought she'd see. Jonathan Bailey has posted. Not a Notes app apology. Not a defensive tweet. Not a panicked statement. Just a simple line on his verified account. With respect, context matters, and so does truth. Full clarity coming shortly. The internet stopped. Fans leaned forward. Journalists refreshed timelines. Influencers hesitated. Meghan's entire digital machine wobbled. Because Jonathan Bailey wasn't hiding. He wasn't scared. He wasn't ashamed. He wasn't confused. He was preparing to expose everything. Now here's where things get even more dramatic and far more dangerous for Meghan. Jonathan didn't simply post a statement. He posted a clip. A clip that no one outside that backstage hallway knew existed. A clip recorded by a security camera mounted directly above where Meghan had whispered those infamous words. I will send you to your grave. The audio wasn't crystal clear, but the tone, the anger, the whisper, the threat, they were unmistakable. The clip didn't show faces, only shadows. But the voices? Perfectly identifiable. Jonathan didn't caption it, didn't explain it, didn't weaponize it. He simply posted. For transparency. That's it. 2 words. 2 devastating words. Words that flipped the narrative instantly. Meghan's PR director gasped. Her aide's face went pale. Meghan's phone started exploding with messages. Not from her fans, not from influencers, not from journalists, but from Hollywood insiders asking, what is this? Meghan, what happened? Did you really say that? Her heart pounded. Her hands shook. This wasn't the story she wanted. This wasn't the story she planned. This wasn't the narrative she could control. She rushed toward the door. Her voice cracked. Her composure shattered. Delete it, she snapped at her team. Contact his publicist. Threaten legal action. Tell them it's doctored. But even she knew the truth. You can't erase something once the world has seen it. Especially when the world has been waiting for something like this. A moment where Meghan's private self leaks into public view. Meanwhile, backstage, Jonathan exhaled, not with triumph, but with relief. He didn't want to destroy her. He didn't want to ruin anyone. He only wanted fairness. Daniel watched him silently before saying, "She's not going to go down quietly. You know that, right?" Jonathan nodded. "She doesn't have to go down. She just has to stop." But Meghan wasn't stopping. She was spiraling. She was pacing, panic rising, breathing shallow, her voice cracking between fury and fear. "How dare he record me?" she shouted. Her aide whispered, "It wasn't him. It was the studio camera." Meghan stopped. Completely still. Studio cameras. Live mics. Security systems. Backstage monitors. It hit her like a punch to the chest. There might be more. More recordings. More footage. More witnesses. Her legs weakened. Her breath shortened. Her eyes watered, not with sadness, but with rage. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no. He cannot do this to me. He cannot humiliate me like this. I won't let him." But here's the irony. Jonathan wasn't humiliating her. She humiliated herself. Her words. Her whisper. Her threat. And now the entire digital world was dissecting that clip, replaying it, slowing it down, analyzing it, comparing voices, speculating about what else might leak. It was only a matter of minutes before hashtags started trending. Hashtag Jonathan Bailey. Hashtag Truth Matters. Hashtag Meghan Caught. Hashtag Backstage Audio. Hashtag Fake Duchess Drama. Meghan watched the chaos unfold in real time, the same way she had watched Jonathan's joke on the monitor. Only this time, she wasn't the one laughing. And she wasn't the one in control. Her PR director whispered, "We need to respond." Immediately, her aide's voice shook. "We need a statement, Meghan. Now." But Meghan's mind was racing. Her heart pounding. Her world shrinking. She wasn't thinking strategically. She wasn't thinking like the Duchess persona. She was thinking like someone terrified of exposure. Someone who realized that the truth she had tried to bury for years was now clawing its way to the surface. And then, just as Meghan tried to form words, another notification hit her phone. A headline. Breaking news. Studio insider confirms backstage tension. More footage may exist. Meghan gasped. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the table to steady herself. More footage. More audio. More truth. Her worst nightmare. Jonathan didn't see this headline. Not yet. He was elsewhere, with someone Meghan had forgotten about. Someone who would drop a revelation even Jonathan wasn't prepared for. Someone who had been silent until now, and was finally ready to speak. Because Jonathan wasn't the only one Meghan threatened that night. And the next voice entering this story would change everything again. Have you ever had that eerie feeling that the truth comes in waves, not all at once, but in layers, each one peeling back a part of the story you didn't even know was there? Like a curtain being slowly drawn open, revealing not just one secret, but several, each more unsettling than the last. That's exactly how the next moment unfolded backstage. Because just when Meghan thought things couldn't get worse, just when she believed she had already hit the limit of exposure, another voice spoke up. And it wasn't Jonathan. It wasn't Daniel. It wasn't a producer. It wasn't a staffer. It was someone she had tried very, very hard to intimidate earlier that night. Someone she assumed would stay silent because they always stayed silent. Someone she had underestimated. And let me ask you directly, isn't it always the thing you underestimate that ends up costing you the most? Meghan Markle's night of unraveling wasn't the result of one confrontation, or one joke, or one moment of rage. No. This was the cumulative effect of years of carefully hidden behavior suddenly crashing into the light. Her whisper, "I will send you to your grave," wasn't the first time she had used intimidation backstage. It wasn't isolated. It wasn't accidental. And the person who stepped forward now was someone she assumed would never dare cross her. A woman. A crew member. Mid-20s. Quiet. Professional. Invisible. At least to someone like Meghan. Her name was Harper. She wasn't important enough for Meghan to remember. Not famous enough to matter. Not powerful enough to be a threat. But sometimes the person with the least power has the clearest view of the truth. Harper stepped into the hallway slowly, gripping something in her hand, a tablet. The backstage tablet used to monitor sound levels, room assignments, camera angles. The kind of device that picks up all kinds of things when someone forgets it's recording. Daniel noticed her first, then Jonathan, then the staffers. Meghan turned last. When she saw Harper, her face tightened the way someone freezes when they recognize a past mistake they can no longer hide. Because Harper was the one Meghan confronted earlier. The one Meghan scolded sharply for not bringing her water fast enough. The one Meghan accused of disrespect for not addressing her as Duchess. The one Meghan snapped at so loudly that 2 producers heard. The one Meghan threatened by saying, "People like you don't last long in this industry." Harper, the shy, quiet, meek girl Meghan thought she could bully into silence. But Harper wasn't silent tonight. Not anymore. She looked Jonathan directly in the eye, steadying her breath. "I think you should see something," she said quietly. Meghan's face drained of color. Harper held up the backstage tablet. Daniel's eyebrows lifted. Jonathan straightened. Every staffer in the hallway leaned in. Because on the screen was footage. More footage. Footage Meghan didn't know existed. Footage from a different angle. Footage from earlier in the evening. Footage showing Meghan, voice raised, temper exposed, mask shattered, lashing out at Harper. The clip wasn't long, maybe 20 seconds. But every second was damning. It showed Meghan's tone, her rage, her entitlement, her threat. Clear, undeniable, unfiltered. "Don't disrespect me," Meghan snarled on the clip. "I don't care what your job is. You call me Duchess. Always." Harper's voice, shaky, replied, "I'm sorry, Ms. Markle, I." Meghan cut her off. "No, not Ms. Markle. Duchess, learn your place." The hallway fell silent. Not the silence of awkwardness. The silence of revelation. The silence of exposure. Because once again, the real Meghan, the one behind the curated image, had been captured. Meghan lunged forward, eyes wide with panic. "Turn that off," she snapped. Her voice cracked. Too raw, too emotional, too unguarded. But Harper didn't flinch. For the first time that night, she didn't shrink, didn't cower, didn't apologize. She stood taller. "No," Harper whispered. "Not this time." Jonathan stepped closer to Harper. Not touching, not interfering, not influencing, just standing beside her in quiet solidarity. Daniel let out a low breath, almost a laugh of disbelief. The staffers watched, wide-eyed, realizing they